episode number 20 of the Who Am I podcast with the Southside Church of Christ, where we are looking at our identity as Christians, especially as it pertains to what that means in today's modern world. I am Brian Dill, and here with me today is, as always, is the superb Jackson Wells.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right, today we are talking about the biblical character Joesph, and Jackson and I have something in common. Jackson, you were the only boy. You have two sisters.
Yes.
I was the only boy. I had three sisters.
Yes.
Can you imagine what it would have been like to grow up with 11 brothers like Joesph did?
Not quite. I think we would have had a football team.
Yeah, something.
Sure.
Right.
Probably would have been called the Wellermen something like that.
Like the song.
Yeah, I think we would have been okay.
Yeah.
We would have started off as basketball, but then once we realized that that was not our sport, then football would have been
right.
it.
Don't you think there'd be a lot of fights?
Oh, absolutely.
Goodness gracious.
Absolutely.
I mean, it almost would have to be.
I didn't have any brothers, but I had cousins, and my cousins and I got in fisticuffs quite often.
Oh, yeah, me too. Oh, well, not cousins so much as nephews, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get this episode started. So as we get started with this week's episode, I thought it might be fun to talk about our siblings for a minute. Whether they like that idea or not, we don't care. So Jackson, tell us a story about one or both of your siblings that you would like for the whole world to hear.
I don't know that my sisters listened to this.
That may be for the best.
So yeah, the one that I'm going to share first is about my younger sister Maria, and she, up until high school, didn't understand how time zones worked. And
okay.
and like she's explained it to me countless times, and I still think it's hilarious because growing up, we shot archery, and the state tournament was always in Louisville, which is Eastern time zone.
Okay.
And
right.
we lived in the Central time zone, and so we would travel up to Louisville.
Sure.
And the time would change.
Of course.
And so she was under the impression that time zones worked in some vertical fashion. So the further north you went...
Oh, like Louisville could be a different time zone, but not Knoxville.
Right. Like it didn't... And then I think, I can remember asking her, Maria, what did you think happened when we went to Florida for vacation?
Right.
And she was just like, I had no idea what was going on. And so I find that quite funny.
Yes.
So yeah, that's Maria. Do you want me to share the one about Audrey, or do you want to share it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So this has happened to Audrey not once but twice.
Uh-oh.
Once when she was old enough to talk.
Okay.
And then once when she knew better or should have known better.
Uh-oh.
But one day our parents came home from a long day of work, which is teaching.
Right.
And so Audrey says a word, and it's a word that she's not supposed to.
Oh, okay.
And so she gets in trouble for saying that word.
Okay.
Mom tests her, like, do you know what you're saying?
Right.
And Audrey, sheepishly says the word, and, she knows that she's not supposed to say it.
So she may not have known what it meant, but she knew she wasn't supposed to say it.
Right. And so then grow up, fast forward 6 or 7 years.
Right.
Me, Dad, and Audrey have been outside working, and we come inside for lunch, and, we're just talking, and then she just all of a sudden uses this bad word. And I was like, did she just say that? But I didn't say anything.
Right.
And then she said it again.
Oh, goodness gracious.
And I was like, Audrey, you can't say that.
It's like she was trying to get in trouble or something.
No. And she was like, you can't? I was like, no, you can't say that.
So she knew what it meant, but didn't think it was bad to say?
No, I don't think she knew what it meant. She just thought that it was like, this is a normal word. This is a normal word that I can use. So she had forgotten from her early youth that she wasn't supposed to say it, and then she reverted back.
Oh, good grief. Oh, wow. All right, so the story I have about one of my siblings. So the difference between our experiences is that yes, I had three sisters, but they're all significantly older than me. So not growing up with them really took me a while to kind of figure out something that I could tell that would be funny.
Yeah.
Because I had to try and dig through like memories of stories that I'd heard more than stories that I experienced, right?
Yeah.
Because they were closer to being old enough to be my mom by the time I was old enough to be remembering a lot of things. But I do remember that my youngest sister, she was in the home still for a little while as I was younger. And she went off to college, and she didn't live real far away in college, just the next county over. And Dad had purchased a car to help her with driving, and I think she may have been driving back and forth at that point from home to college instead of living on campus. And so I think she was driving home one day, and the car just stopped working completely. And so she pulls off the side of the road, and they, take it over to a mechanic or something. And Dad comes and is going to try and help figure out. And Dad's looking at it, and the engine has completely locked up.
Oh no!
And he says, "When was the last time you changed the oil?" And she says, "Last time I did what?" And he says, "You have to change the oil in this vehicle." She's like, "I don't even know what that means." And so
that is awesome.
She had no idea. She owns a car now that's hers, yet she has no idea that she was supposed to do anything with the oil. As she tells the story, she barely knew how to put gas in the car at that point. But
I think that stuff kind of happens. Like I like to make fun of Maria for not, knowing how time zones worked.
Right.
But it's just we forget when we
things
learned
slip through the cracks.
Yeah,
right?
we forget when we learned that, and so we don't teach. We just assume that everybody should know how something works.
If you're getting a car, other than knowing how to put gas in it, number one on the list probably is you've got to get the oil changed because and literally. That car was done.
Dang.
It locks up that engine, and there is no, my sister said she was thinking, whatever's wrong, we'll get it fixed, whatever. But it was like, nope, that car is done. That's gone.
Wow.
You're getting a new car now, or you're not going to have a car for a while is what it ended up being.
Man. So you're talking about you had older sisters, right? And
right.
I think you... are at an advantage because you didn't get to see them grow up, and especially that older one, me being the oldest, I guarantee my sisters could tell so many embarrassing stories about me because
right.
I mean, I was just living life. Mom and Dad didn't know what they were doing with me, whatever. And so I was kind of just an experiment. And
yes.
A lot of times the experiments failed. And so my sisters could tell plenty of funny stories on me.
Right. Well, okay, so we're talking this week about Joesph. As we're occasionally doing with this podcast, we want to look at the life of someone in Scripture, and we want to talk about how God worked through them and how God worked in their lives. And this week, Joesph, whose life is covered from chapters 37 through 50 in the book of Genesis, is one who had a lot of things happen in his life.
Yeah.
And we're not going to have time with our normal podcast length to talk about his entire life, really.
It was insane.
We'll kind of jump through it a little bit. But, if you really want to go read about it, go ahead. It's about 14 chapters in the book of Genesis. So he gets a lot of coverage. His lifespan does. But what's one of the first things that you remember, especially as a kid, reading about Joesph?
Obviously, the Code of Many Colors.
Okay,
that. There was a VeggieTales movie, and so we watched that. We were Dolly Parton fans, and so there's a song that she sings called "Coat of Many Colors."
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a song about where her mom made her a coat of many colors, and all her classmates made fun of her because of it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That almost sounds like that was a true story that she turned into a song.
I think it might have been. I think it might have been.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a typical VBS type story.
Absolutely.
You know.
I remember, I would say, like, moving past the Coat of Many Colors, VeggieTales, Dolly Parton, for some reason I have, and maybe because of VeggieTales, I have a vision, or I'm envisioning, like, the sheaves that are bowing.
Right,
and one of the stories that Joesph tells,
the dreams
makes his
that he had.
brothers mad.
Yes.
For some reason I can remember that, but Joesph definitely is one of those stories where you hear it as a little kid and you're like, oh yeah, I remember Joesph. I remember Joesph.
Right. And I think that's because he is so prominent in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe all this that happens with the coat of many colors and the fact that he was the favorite in some ways with Jacob and all the things that transpire, and the fact that he gets his brothers into trouble, and he has these dreams where it sounds like he's going to be ruling over them one day, and they don't really appreciate that.
Yeah, Joesph was good at, for some reason, he could push people's buttons,
right?
Which is, I think, a skill that the youngest child has.
That's right.
They figure out a way. They figure out a way to just they know how to do it. And Joesph had a knack for it, and unfortunately had 11 older brothers that weren't going to let him slip.
Man, 11 older brothers. Goodness gracious! He gets himself into trouble, and this is something that ultimately leads into some very difficult times for Joseph.
Yes.
Because right off the bat in chapter 37 of Genesis, we read how his own brothers trapped him and sold him into slavery, and took that coat of many colors and put some animal blood on it, and then convinced their dad that he must have been attacked by some wild animal or something.
Yeah.
And siblings don't always get along. You said
right,
but I feel like that's a little more than just not getting along.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to do that with my sisters.
Right. Yeah.
Mom and Dad were not happy. No.
Left them out in the woods behind the house or something.
Yeah. We all get into disagreements with our siblings. But for me, anyways, my two sisters, who were within 4 years of each other, all three of us are within 4 years. So we were super close growing up. And so if there's any disagreement that we've had, we pretty much have found a way to resolve it, and that is it's unique to be able to do that.
Right.
It's not like a normal friendship. Siblingship is something that is typically you don't spend as much time with anybody other than your siblings. I mean,
that's true, and I think maybe some of the age difference made a difference.
Yeah.
Definitely the favoritism,
that is huge.
It played a big role in how his brothers responded. But I think one of the most impressive characteristics about Joseph is that he is able to remain faithful to God in what turns out to be some pretty awful circumstances. I mean, he's sold into slavery by his family. That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's pretty awful, So now he's enslaved, but he's working as kind of a house servant in Egypt for Potiphar. And that goes well for a while. But then Potiphar's wife decides to try and seduce him. And when that doesn't work, she lies about it, and he ends up being thrown in prison.
Like this feels like an episode, or it feels like a sitcom.
Right.
Like
it's almost laughable how bad things go from bad to worse. Right. Yeah. And I think it would have been awfully easy for Joseph to just give up, just say, "Whew, forget it.
Yes.
I can't do this anymore."
It would have been very, very easy to have that many things go wrong and then continue to go wrong. But in order to keep going, there's got to be some sort of mindset that he had where either he could remember that he was his dad's favorite, or he knew that, okay, eventually something's got to give. It's got to break my way eventually. And so this continued perseverance through no matter what trial he had helped him get through. Because there have been times when I have given up, when if I had just gone one more step, if I had just had a little more patience, the grass would have been greener on the other side.
Yeah, I think Joesph is impressively able to continue to do his best in every circumstance.
Yeah.
And to give his best.
Yes.
And instead of just saying, I'm going to do nothing now.
Mm-hmm. It's like regardless of his circumstances, he was going to try his hardest.
Yes. And I think it's because of that he eventually has this rather unique opportunity when the ruler of Egypt, the Pharaoh of the time, was having these dreams that he couldn't figure out what they meant, and no one else is able to figure out what they mean. And so Joesph then is given the opportunity to interpret the dreams, and when he tells the Pharaoh that this means that a famine is coming, Pharaoh essentially makes him second in command in all of Egypt, which is incredible. And he basically hands it over to Joesph and says, okay, now you get to fix this. You get to be in charge of storing up in preparation for the famine, and then the dividing up of the goods as the famine is taking place.
It still feels like an episode of a sitcom.
Oh,
it's like Kramer. For some reason, I'm picturing Joesph as Kramer. He gets thrown into a pit. He doesn't realize he's getting thrown in sold in slavery. He gets wrongly accused of sleeping with Potiphar's wife. And then all of a sudden, he finds himself in charge of Egypt's food. He's like, I have no idea how I got here, but here I am.
Well, I would say the difference is Joesph does have some idea how he got there, right?
Yes.
I mean, Joesph knows that it is his faith in God and his reliance upon God to get him through his circumstances that is what's going to help him, get to where he needs to be. And then what ends up happening is that Joseph's own brothers end up having to come to Egypt looking for help during this famine. And that's in chapter 42 of the book of Genesis. Jackson, can you imagine the temptation for Joesph when his own brothers show up asking for help?
Yeah.
What do you think your reaction might have been?
I might have given them the Godfather treatment. It's like
you coming to me?
You coming to me? You sold me into slavery.
Wait, have you even seen that movie?
No.
Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah.
Or I might have.
Yet the treatment.
I might have Fortnite danced on him. I don't know. Like it would have been. It would so tempting to be like, ha, look at you guys. You guys are suffering. Look at me. You put me here.
Right.
This is your fault. And I get to choose whether or not you eat. Am I gonna? I don't know. I would have I would have definitely left him guessing.
Make him dance for it or something. Yeah. I mean, I think for sure the temptation is to say, nope, sorry.
Yeah.
Figure it out. Oh, good luck. See ya.
Yeah.
Or to carry out some sort of crazy type of vengeance, that, like I said, make them go jump through hoops to get what they need or something. But in an incredible turn of attitude, instead of vengeance, Joesph has this perspective that, in my mind, is one of the most incredible perspectives in all of Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
I know that we have, the Moses leadership, we have Elijah, and we have, Simon Peter, and all of these incredible, faithful people. But I'm not sure Joesph gets enough credit at times for what he ultimately understands to have happened in his life. Because it's in chapter 50. It's actually after their father has died. So Joesph has already helped his brothers and helped his entire family. His entire family now has moved to Egypt, and they're being taken care of well. And then Jacob passes away. And the brothers begin to think, uh-oh, maybe now is when he's going to really let us have it.
Yeah.
Maybe he's been waiting because while Dad was alive, he didn't want Dad to get onto him or whatever.
Right.
Even though he's second in command in all of Egypt. I mean, what's Dad going to do,
Yeah.
really? But, maybe he was waiting until Dad passed away, so we need to do something. And so they kind of approach him and try to say, look, please don't hurt us, whatever.
Yeah.
In chapter 50, in verse 20, Joseph says, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." I find that to be the perspective that I hope I can attain to at some point. I just find that to be incredible.
Well, it's so difficult to look at your trial and pain as something good.
Right.
And so for Joseph to go through everything that he went through, to suffer as much as he did, to spend time in prison, to spend time in a hole.
Which ultimately was the fault of his brothers.
Yeah. He was like, I know what you guys did to me was bad, but obviously I'm in this position and I can take care of you guys. And so I'm gonna.
Right.
Like to be able to realize that, one, God does use your pain for something, whether you realize what it is or not.
Right.
You can use yourself for good for others specifically.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. It really is. And then there's like the forgiveness along with that, to just kind of be able to, I know you did this to me, but I'm forgiving you and I am going to take care of you. When we don't typically do that.
No way. We want vengeance. We want our pound of flesh.
When we've been wronged,
absolutely.
We want to take it out.
Because it's one thing if accidents had happened and spiraled out of control in Joseph's life that weren't really anyone's fault, but things went bad, but then God used what went bad for good in some way, then it's okay. We can have that mindset. Okay, I see how now God has worked these things out. But if his brothers had not been the ones to just despise him and sell him into slavery, then he probably would have been okay.
Yeah.
All these bad things would not have happened. And so that is such a hard thing, I think, for us to really have that level of forgiveness and understanding that, hey, look, you may have done something that was horrible, but I grew because of it.
Yeah.
I
really want to see this as a sitcom now. I really do. I think you've got 14 chapters about one person and his family. There are so many ways you can do that. I wonder, this is just me talking, but I wonder what it would have been like had his brothers not done that to him.
Right.
Would Joesph have become an insufferable brat because he was the favorite, or like did this need to happen to him so he could have this perspective?
And he needed to mature a little bit, right?
Yeah. I think having a maybe not a sitcom, but perhaps a drama, I don't know.
Sure.
Angel Studios, if you're listening. I think it would be a great story to see. But obviously reading your Bible, you can read it for yourself.
Right. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, to think about the kinds of things going through Joseph's mind and the emotions that he went through and through all the different challenges, and then even through the times we do see where he breaks down, when his brothers are there and he realizes who they are. It's interesting. It would be a very interesting thing to see on a screen somewhere.
Yeah. Do you know how old was Joesph whenever he was thrown into the pit? It doesn't say, but
goodness, I feel like somewhere we do get an age, but somewhere in the process of the story, but I can't remember where.
Okay. I was just curious.
Okay, so am I a Joesph? Jackson, what do you think it takes to be a Joesph?
Well, first, you've got to know how to get on people's nerves.
First,
no. The 3 Ps. If you want to be a Joesph, you have to be patient, you have to persevere, and you have to forgive. And I know you have to spell forgive, PH,
Oh,
for it to be the 3 Ps.
I was going to say, is this like pterodactyl with the silent P at the beginning or something?
Patience, perseverance, and forgiveness. That is what made Joseph the way that he was. He's patient with whatever situation he was in, and whenever his situation got worse, he kept going.
Right.
And then in a moment where he didn't have to, he did forgive.
Absolutely, he did. Man. Yeah, Joesph is one of those characters that gets talked about some in VBS and Sunday school when you're a kid, but then we sort of veer away from his story a little bit as adults, because it's almost like, well, I've heard that all before, and we don't go back and dig into his life as often as probably we should.
Yeah, I think, and it's not something we're asking the question, am I a Joesph? My grandfather is a Joseph.
Right.
Because his name is Joseph. But we wouldn't use that term to describe somebody. But if you were described as a Joseph in the sense of you persevere, you're patient, and you forgive, that would be a huge compliment.
Absolutely.
And so understanding the characteristics that Joseph had are really good. Because like you said, when we're kids, we don't really understand. We don't understand what all Joseph went through. We just know that it's kind of a happy ending.
That's right.
And sometimes a happy ending is great, but in order to really, really appreciate that, it's important to understand how he got there.
Yes.
Because that's where we are right now. We're in the process of getting there. We are in the trial of life. We need to be patient. We need to persevere. We need to forgive. And so to have an example like Joesph is good, and we need to remember that.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Okay, well, we really appreciate everyone who is listening. We hope that this week's episode has been uplifting for you and has been helpful in growing your faith and helping you to grow in your identity as a follower of Jesus. Have a blessed day and a great week.